again, none other than Denny K Miu. Denny, what's
I,
happening?
I've been here. It's just that you've been disappearing on me.
Oh, okay. Yeah, well, no, this is the thing with friendships, right? Like
It
I
hurts
I
when
don't
you
put the
don't
burden
call.
on myself or you. And I think this is a sign of friendship too, where we could reach out after years and then it's almost like no time has passed. We only been chatting a couple minutes before the show. And
I
for the
lost Josh. I lost track of the things that you kind of encouraged me to do. Things like insight timer, things. Oh, I lost track. It just there's so many different things. You said, Danny, you got to do this. I said, no, 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 no. He said, no, you got to do this, and then it becomes that thing.
It is. So, if for those of you are who are new to, I guess, either of our work, Denny and I used to do a Ask Us Anything for years, and especially it was during the lockdowns. Some people call it scamdemic even, and it helped me anyway. I can't speak for Denny, but it helped me get through that. It was a huge support, and so yeah, Denny would say something about that, and then I guess we'll just jump right into your work. I think, and I guess if this is for new, you might give people a quick background on yourself. I
Yeah,
guess for
I
those that
guess my understanding is that one of the reasons that Josh reached out to me is that in addition to a small change in his life, he's been out at the United States and then as he look back and he sees some of the work that I'm doing now that tend to be a little bit more political or at least be more aware of the political scenario happening in the United States. And if I understand correctly, you kind of say, "Hey, Danny, why can we just have a conversation on that, right?" But in any case, you mentioned about the pandemic. I actually remember the day that San Francisco started the lockdown, and I believe that it was either February or January 23rd, 2000. And no, 2000, no, what is it?
yeah, I
It's,
think probably what wasn't it two wasn't
no,
it
no,
two
no, it wasn't
thousand?
2000. It
No,
was, it was, it
well,
was 2020, wasn't
well,
it?
that's what I sorry. That's what
Yeah,
I
that's
yeah.
right,
We were
that's right. It
both
was,
thinking the same thing, but
yeah,
we couldn't
2000.
say
There
it.
was
Yes,
another, there's so many
yeah,
things
it's
happening
another
around.
end of
But
the
in any
world.
case,
Yeah.
I think you and I got together because it was the right thing to do, because all of a sudden you have this huge event, people don't understand what's going on. There's a lot of fear. There's a lot of um, fear, mostly fear.
Yeah.
And then we were used to doing physical things, and then we got locked down. So you and I kind of both started this online presence, and it was in a way it was quite new, right? And how do you do meditation? How do you start a class on meditation online when you can't even feel the other person, right? And so um, I think the pandemic, or however you want to characterize it, it was a major event in our life that caused a lot of fear. And I think if you want to come back to what's happening in the United States with the new freely elected president, I want to keep that in mind. you know. So I mean, I have to accept that he was, unless we discover something we don't know or we prove something that we thought we know. But in any case, the man is re-elected. But I think of it as the pandemic number two, you know, 2.0, in that it caused a lot of fear as well, and fear, uncertainty, and so forth. And so I think that our it makes sense that our life changes with it, or as how we, not just our personal life, but also how we pursue meditation, bringing Dharma to the people. And so to the extent that, Josh was saying, hey, Danny, you seem more political now than ever. I don't think I am, but I am bringing that in because you just need to confront it. For the same reason that we were online during the pandemic, you cannot ignore that it's not there. You just have to confront it. And I think with the new president and the way that the country is divided, I think that we just need to confront it and talk about it. You know.
Yeah, and this is what my ex-partner had pushed me more to do, because for years I've been more apolitical. To me, politics in general is an emotional con game. It's kind of designed to trigger people out emotionally. And so whenever I would start to get into it, I would get kind of, it's weird, this triggered emotionally. And so I didn't find that healthy. But all sticking my head in the sand isn't really going to help anything either. Now, I don't think I really need to take a side on everything. But what I do need to do is, like Denny says, is start turning towards it more, and at least reaching out and hearing what other people have to say about it. I don't think I'm an outsider, so to speak, because I'm still, I mean, even today in Prague, where I'm at now, I mean, I was in a tea room and it was American music the entire time. I mean, American culture is almost everywhere in the world. I'm guessing. Of course, I haven't been to too many places, but I hear it all over the world. So, for better or worse or otherwise, it's saturated American culture throughout the world. But the political thing, what I've been seeing and telling people, that whether you love him, hate him, or otherwise, even if there is some things that are somewhat beneficial to some people, what is really troubling that I see is these executive orders. That if that becomes normalized, that is like a dictatorial decree. This is what dictators do. They say, this is what I'm going to do, and then you got to do it. So if that becomes normalized, I mean, a lot of people can't imagine someone worse than the president. But what if there is somebody that's a lot worse comes along, and then over the years, just this becomes natural for the president to issue all these executive orders, and people just go along with it, and the checks and balances of the Congress and the judiciary branch are no longer keeping that in check the way they did. Then to me that seems like a dictatorship, or has the potential to be a dictatorship.
Yeah.
We've got militarization of the police. I mean, that's been going on for years. I've heard it's stepped up in DC now, or the news says that anyway. So I think that's enough. I'll throw it back to Denny here.
Yeah. First of all, I want to go back to what you said about the European perspective, being a American living outside the country, and seeing all the popular culture being so heavily influenced by the quote unquote American culture. Um, I think the rest of the world, at least in Asia, where I'm more familiar with, and possibly by extension to Europe as well, is they're actually more bewildered with what's going on in the United States than it is that they lost faith in the American spirit. In some way, the Asians and the Europeans, either just out of their own hope for the better, they seem to have more confidence in the resiliency of our our system than it is for us who's living in here. And many of us are really, really, really in a deep state of despair. Exactly what you said in about the executive order. Executive order is just a reflection of the lawlessness that is going on. That I've been in this country more than 50 years now, became a naturalized American citizen, um, and really accepted the idea that we should all be contributing member, but with the idea that it's a very inefficient system, with the division of power in the three equal branches. So what you see now is that it's actually it's dictatorship, but it's actually more like thugs. You know, there's a group of people represented by an individual, but he the problem is not with the individual. The problem is with the group mentality, in that there are certain things that they want to do, they want to remedy, and they decided that the two other branches can be ignored, and they basically ignore the judicial branches because it's by design. It's a very slow moving mechanism. So in everything that has been done since the beginning of this presidency is illegal and is being challenged in the court. But it doesn't matter because the court moves so slowly that it's not really a balancing power anymore. And then on the other side, on the on the Congress, um, it's basically intimidation. You know, in this intimidation both by basically controlling the entire general election process. So um, it's not that they have the majority. It's just they have such a vocal and powerful minority that they can basically defeat that person, their own Republicans, in the primary. So that's a threat. But there's also the personal threat. You know, I think Nancy Pelosi came out and says, you know why people are so um, afraid? You just look at me, right? I am the Speaker of the House. I should have all the protections that the country can bestow on me, and yet someone can just walk into my house and and attack me, and then attack my husband by accident. And so people are not afraid are not are very afraid to speak out. So essentially, you have this way of doing what they want to do, even though that they know that it's illegal. Uh, but they can get away with it. They can get
It,
away with it until, and the irony is that this is not one party versus the other. You know, if you think that the Republican Party is evil, then the logical conclusion would be that, well, in a year when we have the midterm election, then the Democrats should win. It's majority, but that's not even the case. There's no confidence that the Democrats can take back the House. you know and because this is going back to what I said, is that it's easy for us to focus on one individual and think that he is the one that's responsible for all this, but it's not true. It is not true. It is really a movement um, across the world. For example, recently in Japan, they have a guy who's running for office under the banner of Japanese first, you know, and he's pointing to all the non-Japanese immigrants that are coming into legally, by the way, legally, to take up jobs that they cannot fill. I mean, I go to Japan 3 times a year, 4 times if I could, but I see how in the major cities they just ran out of workers. So I see a lot of foreign workers, people from um, the Philippines, the Indonesia, the Bangladesh, even the Nepal, and they come in. They're very highly educated. They have a college degree, but they're doing service jobs, and they speak perfect Japanese because they're trained. So you have they're very very uh, um, meticulously attracting talent because they don't have people. Every year they lose 1 million people. That's a lot of people. It's an aging problem. But the point is, um, what we have in the United States is really a reflection of the entire world. And so one would ask, well, what happened then? What has happened um, in the last, let's just take the last 30 or maybe 40 or maybe 50 years. And I can give you a personal experience. I will open the door, open the window, and I look out and I see the change in my neighborhood. Back in 1974, when I first came to this neighborhood, 3 years after we came here as as immigrant, my dad bought this house, very rundown house. All windows were all broken and all that. And back then it was like less than $45,000. He bought this house, which was a lot of money back then. And we were the first non-white neighborhood that moved in. Maybe not the first, but there were very few. But there were very, very few. And I remember the first day that I walked out the door, I opened the door, and the guy across the street was yelling at me and says, "Why don't you go back to where you come from?" You know, because we were very, very few of us. It was a new thing, for the non-white immigrants to now keep in mind that the guy was yelling at me. He himself was an immigrant, perhaps from Ireland or whatever. It doesn't matter. But you see how the society changed, and now there was a time, but not anymore. Well, it's interesting. There was a time when I looked out and all I see was Asian. So the question is, what happened to the 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 the, the, the white immigrants that were living here? Well, they can't afford to live here anymore. They don't have good paying jobs. So what happened then is that the globalization of the economy, pushing out all the manufacturing jobs, pushing out all the union jobs to the third world country, places like China, places like Vietnam, it empties out the middle class in America. The definition of middle class, as I remember when I first came to this country in 1971, was that my uncle, his wife, my aunt, was the oldest sister of my father, and so she became American citizen, and it was her right to be reunited with her family. So we came here as legal immigrant, right? And when we came, my uncle, who was a World War II veteran, and it's because of the fact that he was a World War II veteran, he got an exemption from what is called the Exclusionary Act. The Exclusionary Act was a legislations at the end of the 19th century to basically prevent the Chinese people from coming into to the United States. So if you were in the United States and you were not born here, uh, from that day on, you cannot go back and get married, or you cannot even become an American citizen. And that was happening for a long, long time until World War II came. And my uncle, who came here as an immigrant, he volunteered to join the Navy. And because of that, he was exempt from the Exclusionary Act. And so he was able to go back and marry my aunt, and we came here. And so back to my comment about what is middle class, back in 1971, middle class was my uncle working as a postman, which was something that he could do because he was a veteran. And he was just working a 9 to 5 job. That was it. My aunt didn't work, and they had 2 kids in the house, and they had a nice big house. They have, maybe 2 or 3 cars, and they had a union job. There was no concern about medical benefit. There was no concern about job security, and you know and they didn't have to worry about the future. They didn't have much of education. Even the kids didn't have to worry about much of the future. The kids didn't even have to need a college degree. That was back in 1971. Well, that is completely gone. That is completely gone, right? Because all those low-paying jobs, all those um, has left the United States. So then the question is that what happened to those people that used to live in my neighborhood? Well, they had to move away from California, from the blue states to the red states. So they, so over time, in the 60 years, 55 years that I've been here, our election, our political system has gone from one where we are campaigning on governance to one where we are campaigning on grievance. You know, it was a big deal that George W. didn't serve in the quote unquote regular military. That he was a National Guard. It was not considered a honorable enough experience to um, sacrifice for the country. You know, Bill Clinton never served, and in fact was able as a draft dodger. That was a big deal. So before that, the Reagans, well, Reagans didn't serve much neither, but at least there was a reason for he did his thing. George H.W. Was a big deal that he was a veteran. So there was a time when it was almost a minimum barrier to entry for someone to run for a public office, that they have to be a veteran serving in the war, making sacrifice for their country, and they have to be somewhat upright, character, because we want them to um, be our leader. And so there was a time when our politics was all about governance. And in fact, we expect them that whoever elected them in office, they serve all the people. And everybody campaign on that. Everybody execute on that. And but that has moved from governance to grievance now. And so it's all about grievance. It's really all about how I'm a victim and of the economic systems that all the good jobs have gone to the immigrants, all the, so it became America first. And, the movement is called Make America Great Again, which really meant Make America White Again. That's what it means. And people really react to that. And that's just the reality. And it's not in the United States, it's all over the world. I mean, Europe's are worse, actually, in some way.
Is, well, all I can say is I'm kind of glad that I'm out of the United States right now in a way. But Denny, you said so much here. You went from the term I like at the beginning when you started is gangster capitalism. We've had gangster capitalism for quite some time now, where they rule business like gangsters, and there's so much here. The whole immigration thing is a huge, huge, huge mess in political football, meaning that so many sides are involved and will spin it their way to get what they want out of it. I don't really know what to say other than the United States is still an experiment. I mean, compared to a lot of the rest of the world, I mean, it's such a new country and such an experiment, and it kind of got off from the ground start really quite powerful and influential, which is I don't know if that's unheard of in world history because I'm ignorant a lot of world history and actually a lot ignorant of a lot of the what's going on in the daily news because I don't really follow it, all these headlines and things. But I will say that this mirror metaphor is really important. That these are kind of reflections of ourselves and the society. Not that I can necessarily speak so much, but there is a lot to that in spiritual teachings. Um, yeah, I don't even know where to start with the immigration thing. I mean, pretty much everyone in America is an immigrant, other than the native people that were kind of forced off their lands in genocide. And we don't even know much about what came before them, like the Mississippi mound builders. We get way back into ancient history. But the one thing I wanted to mention here is for all the brilliance that Denny has put here and has a grasp on what's going on. This is to me, it's almost not necessarily at surface level. It does go deeper than that, but there is things that are going on behind the scenes. I feel there's like a hidden hand. What are the deeper forces at play? Those with a lot of money and power who don't want to be in the limelight because then they will be kind of exposed to what's going on. Trump is still kind of, the president is kind of a figurehead still. Those behind him wield a lot of power and stay kind of in the shadows. And the one thing I'll throw in here, though, too, is these. I don't want to say tech bro, but there's kind of a transhuman technocratic movement coming on with figures like Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, and things like this who want to, some people say, have a technocratic state where everything will be micromanaged by technology and like social credit scores, things like this. And I think this is a huge concern too. So I don't. I think this is another a big dynamic. We also have this Agenda 2025 that I think that's what it is, where there's a huge religious Christian aspect to the right, and Project 2025, I think. And I don't know enough about that, but some say there's a big revival and resurgence in certain areas of America that are playing into that. So yeah, there's a lot of things to throw in here, but yeah.
Well, I like to, Josh, I want to pick up on one thing that you said in the beginning, which is that you didn't like politics. You thought that politics was a con game. And so I agree with that, absolutely. I think I learned.
Emotional con game.
Absolutely,
Emotional. Yes.
absolutely.
Yeah.
But it's not the only emotional kind of game. So I
No.
think people told me, he says, no. Politics is Hollywood for the ugly people.
That's great. The
So
grievance thing you
basically,
said
you
is
have
really
to
important
understand
too. The
politics.
victimhood is really
Yeah.
important that
So
you
you
talked
we
about.
really have to understand politics in the context of Hollywood, which is that those people, the people who are working in Hollywood, um, they succeed because they understand human emotion, and they want to create a scenario in a storyline that would stir up the emotions. But that is economic enterprise. They do it for money. I have no problem with that. In the Hollywood is a very risky game. I mean, you know how many movies has have flopped. You know how many movies that had succeeded the first time and the sequel flop. But the point is that Hollywood is in some way is a con game as well, right? It's creating an imagery that its entire purpose is to stir up emotion. So
Yes,
in that,
deceptively, and it's a
yeah,
cesspool, and it
yeah.
uses there's money laundering involved in a lot of movies too.
There is that
It's
too,
real,
but on the
really bad. Yeah.
face of it,
Yes.
it's entertainment,
Yes.
right? And
For
successful
money.
entertainment is when the people who are behind the enterprise understood human emotion. And so politics is exactly the same. Politics is successful when the people behind it also understood human emotion. So I want to come back to the human emotion because I want to come back to what it means to a meditation teachers like you and I uh, when we're dealing with what I called earlier the pandemic 2.0. Because we knew, looking back, we knew what the opportunity when the first pandemic came, right? And now, if I wanted to just borrow that, this is 2.0. So the question is, how, as a meditation teacher, you know, deal with that, right? How then? And so I'll come back to that. But then I want to come back to this idea that politics is the Hollywood for the ugly people. Well, guess what? Hollywood has a lot of people behind the scene, as you mentioned. Politics have a lot of people behind the scene. So the question is, if politics have people behind the scene, they're behind the scene because they see it as a way of making more money, which is fine. Well, then politics have people behind the scene because they see it as a game. It's not about money anymore. There's no, unless you're uh, of course, people are in politics because of the bribery, because of the all that, and they make a lot of money. Especially with our president now, basically manipulating the stock market by announcing tariff one day and then say no, 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 maybe not, and then pointing to companies and no, the CEO should be fired. That's all manipulation. But put that aside. Put that aside. Is that there are a lot of people behind the scene in politics who are doing it as a game. And they do it as a game because they have played every other game. They have so much money that they don't know what else to do, right? So you mentioned the tech bro. So it's as much as you point to the money behind the scene on the Republican side, there is more money behind the scene on the Democratic side. As a general stroke, I will tell you that the people, and living in San Francisco, I know this. If the people who are behind the politics in San Francisco are the rich people, but by and large, not 100%, by and large, they are people who have inherited the wealth, and they look at
Old money.
themselves and say that
Old
I
money.
can't even spend the interest of my inheritance, right? I've done everything. I travel around the world. I built big mansions. Okay, so I'm going to put it in molding the society in a way that I think is the right way. So for them, it's a game. Now, you have the
Of
same
course.
people on the other side. I'm glad that you mentioned Peter Thiel. And this is the Peter Thiel is the dark law of the Republican or the new Republican Party. He is in cahoot with Elon Musk, and together they were the guy that arranged for J.D. Vance to be the vice president. They did this knowing that Donald Trump is not going to last 4 years. His health won't support him for, that. And so they're putting um, JD Vance in place, to be to be. So they have this plan. They have this, decades of plan. Now, so talking about, so both sides are manipulating us, just like that. What they do in Hollywood. So, and what they manipulating is really what we call, the Buddhist students, the people who study Buddhism, what we call the five hindrances, is the attachment, attached to something in the past, attached something that, whatever that is they want to attach to, don't want to give up on what makes them feel right and feel good, and it's the aversion, and then finally it's the fear, it's the loss of faith. So a big part of what we see on both sides is fear. It's the fear for the future, fear of the immigrants, fear of job security, and fear is basically a combination of attachment and loss of faith. And then if I have to pick two words that really dominates our transition from a political system that is based on governance to what I now call a political system that is based on governance, the two words would be fear and conspiracy.
Yeah, and it's wow, there's so much good stuff to get into here, Denny. Fear, yes, when people are in fear, they're easier to control.
Yeah,
They will give up kind of a lot of things they normally wouldn't give up for a perceived sense of safety. It's all about controlling the narrative. What is Hollywood based on? A narrative, a story, right?
yeah,
Whoever
yeah,
controls the narrative has pretty much control of a lot of things. And I can totally agree with
yeah.
these people that have more money than will ever spend in multiple lifetimes. What do they do? It's power. And then these people get
It's a
into
game.
like secret societies.
Yeah.
Some are in occult circles and do really horrendous, horrible things that I've heard of, but I can't corroborate any of that. And so, that stuff may or may not be. And then it's all based on secrecy too, right?
Yeah.
Because if they can hold secrets, and we look at the military industrial complex, look at Eisenhower, who warned us of this, who was a huge general, and this is a huge deal. And then we have super PACs. We have anonymous money that you can't trace back, know where it comes from. Now, I'm kind of on the fence here. I'm not anti money making, but when it comes to anonymous, unlimited donations, buying and selling politicians, and we don't even know who's buying them, basically. The blackmail operations, the brownstoning operations, that they have dirt on so many of these people that can pull their strings or make it up. So it is really in a state, and I'm not really big on calling a constitutional convention either, because as bad as things are, I think it would, if we rewrote the Constitution, it would probably be even the state of consciousness and conscience that we're in right now. I don't think that could really help matters a lot either. Um, yeah, so there's just so much, and I want to be more. We're offering solutions,
Yeah.
instead of
Yeah.
just
Let's do
stating the
that. Let's do
problems.
that. Mm-hmm.
And in what
Mm-hmm.
Denny mentioned with the
Yeah.
hindrances, this is where um, we can't control other people. As
Yeah.
far as I
Let's do
know,
that. I
I
think that's
cannot
the
control
really
other
why
people,
we're here. Yeah.
and this
Let's
is
do
why
that.
practice is so we've kind of laid out the kind of
Yeah.
big picture here
Right.
and even gone
But
into
but
specific
Josh,
things.
if I
Hmm.
may,
Sure.
I do want to talk about. I mean, I want to go back to the beginning, which is, in the beginning of the pandemic, you and I, we see this event coming up that is going to cause a lot of pain and anxiety, and we change our way. We become more online, online presence. That's really, even though we met physically at one point, most of our engagement has been online. So we want to kind of say, what is the parallel now? How do we do that? How do we adjust that? But before I do that, if I may, I wanted to just wrap up this idea that politics and Hollywood is all about manipulating emotion. And I want to give you one example of how both sides are manipulating the emotion. And this is coming back. I think you mentioned about immigrants, and you mentioned about this country being a country of immigrants. That we have this long, honorable, um, tradition of welcoming immigrants. Right? Just look at. I mean, there's a joke that the French want to get want the liberty, Statue of Liberty returned because we no longer, you know. But the point is, I want to just make it very very clear. As an immigrant myself, we do not we do not have an immigrant problem in the United States. None, zero. It's not even there. Now, the reason I say that, and I'll say that the problem didn't come from the Republicans, the problem didn't come from the people who are backing the Republican agenda. It actually came from the Democrats. It actually came from the people who I said, you know, who for the most part have inherent tremendous will, but didn't know what to do with them, and so they had this twisted idea of what the society should look like, and it all started when they started using the word undocumented immigrant. This is where I begin. Now, when I first came to the United States, I might still have it. No, I don't have it. I don't have the green card anymore. What is called the green card. When I became the citizen, they took away my green card and they gave me a thing that says that I'm now naturalized American citizen. I still have that. But when I first came in 1971, I came in June, and by August, I received this card. It's not exactly green, it's called a bluish, but it's called a green card anyway. And on top, it says legal alien. So there was a difference between illegal alien versus legal alien. Now, back then we weren't thinking about UFO. We are just basically saying that, okay, you know, you have people who live in this country and you have people who came into this country. So people who came into this country were called aliens. They weren't even called immigrant. They were called alien. And we were legal. Okay, now this is very important. So how do you become a legal alien, or what we call now a immigrant? Well, it wasn't because we had any right. We weren't even part of the country, so we had no right to be here. The only people that had right were American citizens. So our immigration policy, the United States, in not there were the refugees. You know, the Statue of Liberties was all about the refugees, people who came in and, you know, escaping poverty, escaping political prosecutions and all that. And we had a system to accept them, and then eventually make them legal. But we were not that. We didn't come in here as refugees. We came in here as legal immigrants, and our green card says legal aliens because we were aliens, but we were legal. So all immigrants to the United States, even today, had to be legal. And in our case, we came because my aunt, who I mentioned earlier, was American citizen, and she had the right, as an American citizen, to be united with her family. And that family happened to be their offsprings. They get priority, and then if they happen to be siblings, they have lower priorities, and so forth and so on. So we came with my father, who was the sibling, and we waited our turn. So eventually, our turn came, we came, and our card says legal alien. Now, that's the only way that you could be an immigrant, because there is no such thing as undocumented immigrant, because they would have been called illegal alien. So if you came into this country and you came in illegally, you are a criminal. You broke our law, and you have no right. You have no right. In fact, as a citizen, we have no right unless we cross the border. See, this is something we don't understand, is that, well, we have a right. We have the Fifth Amendment. We have all that. Well, that only works when you're inside the country. When you're outside the country, before you cross the border, the custom agents, they don't have any reason to give you any rights because you haven't crossed the border yet. So we have to understand that we don't have an immigration problem in this country. We should stop calling the illegal aliens undocumented immigrants, because number one, they're not immigrants. Number two is that they broke the law. Okay,
So, Denny, you're going to have to help me understand this a little bit. I think I know where you're coming from. I can sense now. I've been away from America for almost over a year now, and that this is become a huge emotionally charged issue. And I don't,
yes,
I don't really understand it. I mean, I am a descendant from immigrants.
but
Maybe
you're
third or
correct.
fourth generation
But
from.
hang on,
Yeah,
but you were a
mhm.
citizen because you were born here.
That's right. And so
We were,
and that
being a
doesn't apply.
descendant of immigrant doesn't mean it doesn't
Mm,
is not even part of the discussion here.
mm.
You know, you are a citizen. I mean, we can talk about
This is
natural
legal
born.
language. So this
Yeah,
is if you and I don't have a legal background. I mean, we have to
yeah.
get like Black's Law dictionary here. We've got maritime law. We've got um, natural law. We've got all this stuff that
Josh,
I
it's not
don't
that complicated.
understand
It's not that
exactly.
complicated.
Mm,
It is really not that complicated. Up until now,
mm.
if you were born in the United States, you're a citizen,
Well,
right?
sure, I understand that.
Yeah.
It's not that way in
When
the all parts of the world, though. Just
no,
because
no,
you're
we only talk about this country.
in the United
In
States,
this
yeah.
country, if you were born in United States or even in territory that are controlled by United States, like the Panama Canal, you would be a American citizen. Now, there's some discussions. Now, maybe your parents has to be legal first. You can't just come in here, give birth to a baby and leave, and then thinking that okay. So that's something aside. But very simply, if you were born here, you're an American citizen. If you come here legally after 5 years, after you satisfy some criteria, for example, not breaking any laws, this and that, you can naturalize and become an American citizen. So American citizen is one huge bucket. There's no ambiguity on that. Okay. Then the question is then how can you become a legal immigrant? You can become a legal immigrant if you have a family member who is American citizen who sponsor you, and they cannot sponsor everyone, but you have to have the right requirement. You have to satisfy the right requirement, and then they apply for you to come to the United States, and then you wait your turn. Some of them wait 20 years. These days, if you apply for your brother to come here, you have to wait 20 years, but they wait the turn, okay? Or you come in here as a refugee and you're applying for refugee asylum and that kind of thing. Or you come in here, you're a student, and then this is something called the Einstein rule, which is you're so brilliant that the government gives you legal status. Or there is, even in the past, there is a kind of a lottery. There actually is a lottery that every year they give. But all these are legal avenues to become a citizen. Then you have the illegal. And if you are illegal, you broke the law. You're not an immigrant. So you cannot confuse that with the legal immigrant.
Okay,
If you
I got it
confuse
now.
that by
Yeah,
calling them documented immigrant,
yeah. That's
that's
now I got it.
wrong.
I got
Okay?
it.
And that's the problem with
Okay.
why so many people of color, whether you're Hispanic or you're Asian or whatever, we actually, either in fact or in spirit, we actually support the Republicans because we wait a turn to become illegal immigrants. It's disgusting to think that you can be just come in here. Anyway, I only want to say that
Mm.
just to say that this is not a problem with one political party versus the other. This is not a problem with one individual versus another individual. The problem is really with the money behind it.
Absolutely, and
Yeah.
human trafficking is a huge thing too.
But that's not an
So
immigration
you're
problem.
right, exactly, and
That's
this is why
that's a
Denny makes a
legal. That's
huge,
a
really good point that
yeah.
words matter really a huge
It
amount.
does.
I'm
It
so
does
glad you
matter.
educated
Yeah.
me on this
Yeah.
because what they're falsely labeling as illegal immigrant is just straight up basic criminality. It has nothing to do with immigration, right? There's
Yeah.
criminals, and then there's what Denny said with what the immigration status, because it does make sense that there are people with, like you said, multi-generational wealth that move human assets. I don't know if that's the right way to put it, in certain countries, with the intent to destabilize certain nations in order to divide the people, cause unrest, and then take power and control. So I could imagine. Of course, I can't back that up with a lot of documentation, but I could imagine that would be something that somebody could do with a lot of power and money if they wanted to, you know.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
that's just straight up criminality. That has nothing
yeah.
to, right?
Now, I want
Yeah,
to. I think now is a good time to come back to why we're here, or at least
exactly.
both you and I, deep down, why we're here. We're both meditators. We're both meditation teachers. So, I think the problem is that in our teaching, the Buddhist teaching, we emphasize the duality of compassion and wisdom. And so, in some way, you can say that, on one party, they trump, well, Trump is the bad word here, but the point is that they focus more on compassion and not so much the wisdom. So you could be very compassionate and do the wrong thing if you didn't really. So the question is, what is wisdom then? Wisdom is not smartness. Wisdom is not knowledge. So in our teaching, wisdom is to understand your own emotion and not be burdened and by it. And so this is really important to the teaching now, because if you think of what's happening with the new regime, and you think of that as pandemic 2.0, and this is stirring up a lot of emotion. And so the question is, how do we deal with that? And I think one of the things you mentioned, Josh, is that first of all, we can only change ourselves. We can't change others. So there's places where you can change others. You can go out and walk the street, do the protest, all that. And we're not staying away from that. That's something you can do, and taking the message to the people. But as a meditator, as a Buddhist student, we don't believe in that. We don't actually believe that. We believe that we can change ourselves first, and then once we can change ourselves, then we can then change, influence, or maybe use ourselves as an example for other people to reflect on. And so what we do is really cultivating our own wisdom. And our definition of wisdom is to truly understand our emotion and be sensitive to it. And so, what we sometimes call emotional intelligence. And intelligence means two ways. It means being very how to use our emotion very intelligently. That's one way. And then the other way is learn to be sensitive to our body and the breath, so that they become the intelligent agent to our emotion, right? So one of the so to that extent, ever since the new regime, um, I've been kind of writing essay as introduction to my weekly class. And for those who are not used to that, you can look at that and say, "Wow, Denny's become very political." I am not. I'm using the politics, the reality of the politics, as a context for our practice, right? So one of the ones that I can think of is the one I said, everything happens within us. You know, it's very easy to uh, open the TV, or to open the iPad, read a news article, or to talk to a friend about politics, and to think that the politics is happening to us. No, actually, the politics is happening, but what really happened to us is what's inside of us, is how we react to it. And another way that another title that I use is said, what you consume consumes you. You know, so the other side is playing with fire. He's playing with people's fears, playing with the people's tendency to believe in conspiracy. And if you consume that, it will consume you. You know.
These are really good points, Denny. Yeah, it's a tough one. First, I wanted to say that yes, I guess you can consider me a meditation teacher. I'm more of kind of a Dhamma friend that likes to share Dhamma and talk about Dhamma related things and how that applies to your life. And I couldn't agree more with this internal notion of it. Um, Now, how we view things and how we respond to things, the wisdom aspect you talked about, that's right view, right? Right view, and then our right intention as well. And also, wisdom will, I think, wisdom and the heart meet in um, our thoughts, our speech, and our action too. And the most beautiful qualities of emotion, I feel, and relating to the world in general are the Brahma Viharas, the metta, the compassion, the sympathetic joy or the rejoicing. Let's not forget that. That is a great remedy for when we get too, or when I get too bogged down in negative things like that too, is thinking of all the goodness that I have shown in my past, and all the goodness has been shown for me, and all the success and joy that other people are having, and how that can contribute to my well-being too. And then the equanimity. A lot of times there's not anything we can really do in a certain way, in just knowing that every being is responsible for their own actions. I'm not responsible for any other's actions and speech other than my own. So, in a way, I would love to have a less individualistic culture in a lot of ways, but because things are so divided, we almost have to look at the individual level. I think in the states, and this is where it can be a strength in a way to meet each individual heart to heart, mind to mind, heart mind to heart mind. And that's how I move through the world too. Instead of well, I still deal in abstractions and generalities, because those help us kind of, I don't know, navigate through the world when we need to kind of have a bead and how to orient ourselves and how to make choices. But when it comes down to it, it's a face to face, heart to heart conversation with each individual you meet. And that's how I kind of know whether to be skillful, whether to set boundaries with someone or to let them in, to trust, or what's needed in the moment. And wisdom just kind of, um, our wisdom comes through in every aspect of life. So, like Denny was saying, everything is an opportunity for practice. Nothing is really separate from practice, and in fact, nothing is really separate at all. Everything is interconnected and
Yeah,
interpenetrating each other too. So,
yeah,
what I do to someone else affects me. And vice versa too. So these are the training, and we start off with generosity. That's something everyone can do, and the Buddha would only teach generosity starting off, and then he would teach sila or ethics, and it's all based on
mm-hmm.
non-harming,
Mm-hmm.
and then into the cultivation bhavana of meditation, and then wisdom. And it doesn't have to necessarily be like a step ladder. I mean, each wisdom will inform our meditation practice, inform our ethical conduct. And ethical conduct, not because, oh, I should be, but because this is for our welfare and happiness and that of others, and not to be believed in. You tried. Whoa, sorry about that. One moment. I spilled coffee. A little light moment here on my laptop, and luckily the only thing that got fried was my camera. So I've got my iPhone as the camera there. A little bit of a
Mm-hmm.
blooper,
Mm-hmm.
something for the blooper reel there. So yeah, no, and I know this from experience. Of my past actions were not the greatest things in the world. Let's just put it that way. And it took meditation for me to see them. And so this is, I really feel this is so foundational, so important, of non-harming, not stealing, training though, and
Yeah, yeah,
not speaking falsehoods, and
yeah,
refraining from intoxicants. And which one am I missing here? Sexual misconduct.
yeah,
Yeah. So these are
yeah,
these are really helpful for our well-being and those around us. But don't take my word for it. It's a training.
yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah.
So in my case, since the last a big part of this year since the new regime, new president, um, I'm focusing more on harmony, more on harmony. I'm really trying to much. Actually, in some way, it makes my life a little easier with all what's going on outside. Because, for example, the first time I held the Saturday class after the election, I point to the camera and said, if you vote for Trump, you don't belong here. I don't want you as a student. It's not that I think that you're evil. It's just that I have no time for you. You know, cannot hear you. Cannot hear you.
Sorry about that. My
Yeah,
own Denny, I've quit voting actually. Now I don't really encourage anyone else to do that because
yeah,
we can still have effect on a local level. I feel,
yeah.
but
And
I think
yeah,
I'll put
yeah,
that aside for now. My
yeah.
reasoning,
But
but
you
yeah,
know what happened when after I said that? Not one student left because none of them vote for Trump. It was a non-issue.
I'm not
But
really
my point is
surprised.
that
Yes, yeah.
I had to do that because it helped me focus. And now I'm focusing on the people who are in distress. Okay. And so the question is, how do I approach my fellow citizens who are in distress because of what's happening outside of us? And what I find is that, well, let me just focus on something that we all have in common right now is that for the most part, we are aging baby boomers. And so health and longevity is something that we all have in common. Politics is not. Maybe it is, but it is. It doesn't. But health and longevity. So in the last 9 months or so, I focus on that. I have the politics as a background, and I talk about how the politics, the daily daily attack on our emotion, on our spirit, on our physics, has how it affects our health, both our physical health and our mental health, and and also how we live in the last 60 years. How the society has changed affects our health, and it comes down to essentially, in the simplest form, is that in the last 60 years, we have tried to outpace our evolution. You know, all the way back when we first got off the trees and start walking upright and living in a cave, there was this harmony between when you're outside the cave and when you're inside the cave. When you're outside the cave, you're in danger. Your body has evolved into fight or flight. And when you're inside the cave, your body was able to restore itself because you're now in rest and digest. And so, to the extent that meditation has helped people's health, is that we gave them a mechanism and a platform to restore what we call the autonomous nerve disorder, and that turned out to be very powerful. And so a lot of students came here just and so I talk about my teaching in terms of N-E-U-R-O. N is nutrition. That's outside the class. There's something you have to do. E is exercise. That's all right. That's what we're doing here. But the kind of exercise that is not, it's a balance between energetic exercise and restorative exercise like yoga. And then finally, U is unwinding. Is idea that the vagus nerve is very important. How do you reactivate the vagus nerve? Sliver is a very good measure. People talk about hydration, but self hydration means that your body is in harmony. And then finally, restorative. Of all the things that we do wrong, not be able to get a good night's sleep is the worst thing you can do to your body. There's been a lot of study now on how people who suffer from dementia, such as my father, actually has very bad sleep patterns. That's the beginning. It's really the hormone balance, right? And then finally, being very open to change, open to what you mentioned earlier, compassion, loving kindness, empathy, and equanimity. So N-U-U-R-O is what I talk about now because it's the one thing that we all have in common. But the point to that is harmony. So if you want good health, you have to find the harmony between your sympathetic and your parasympathetic. You have to learn to do exercise, energize your body, activate your glands so that you have stress hormone, and most importantly, the cortisol, which is a steroid. It actually reduces inflammation in your body. The difference between someone um, who live a long life, but in as measured in health span, as opposed to someone who happened to live a whole life, but is measured by lifespan, you know, is inflammation. By the time you reach 60, 65, people already know that you might end up living to the 90s, but you're going to be, very unhealthy. You're going to be, and understand that the Western medicine doesn't actually heal or cure. It only reduces symptoms. Okay, so all of that, so it's all about harmony. Now, once my plan as I execute it is that once you understand that harmony is the key to your physical health and harmony is the key to your spiritual and your mental health, then you can take that further and to understand that harmony is what allows you to have neighbors and then the society. You know, it's all about harmony. It's not about fear and conspiracy. It doesn't work. It's really the ability to have a conversation. That when you see someone who's camping on your streets, that's a human being. It's if you cannot help that person, at least go by and say hi. Anything I can do to help. You know, I I have that outside the street all the time. Fear is not going to help that problem. You know, and then ultimately is the harmony in how we live in our habitat, what we call the planet Earth. And that's the one thing that's completely lost. So you talk about America being an experiment. It's a failed experiment. It has been a failed experiment. And the only way that we could succeed is to refine a balance.
Well, those are beautiful words, Denny. I want to go a little bit deeper here, if we can, just briefly, and then I guess we'll start wrapping up here. Um, Now we have this, and I'm totally into health and healing and everything. And I think actually I'm going to answer my own question before. I think harmony is one of the bridges here. Um, but we've got, California is not to overly stereotype, but there's a lot of health nuts in California, right? A lot of people that are into really good food, just everything basically to prolong life and be healthy and live a long life. And of course, we all want that. I mean, it would be insane not to want that, right? And then on the other hand, we have this Buddhist reflection that everything we have that we hold dear, we will be parted from, um, and we're going to die someday. So, how do we take that reflection that we should be reflecting on every day too, because that is the inevitable truth of the matter, and then, but then not get fearful and overwhelmed by that to neglect health, happiness, harmony, and balance. So we've got these. It's not necessarily. Well, in a way, maybe it is a paradox, and I think there's a lot of spiritual paradoxes, and it's okay. We can be comfortable with paradoxes too. We can integrate these, we can hold these at the same time, and they don't have to be conflicting things. They can harmonize in themselves. So, for me, this is an ongoing thing. To be able to hold these truths and these ways of viewing the world and the way of moving in the world, of yes, we are going to die, we're going to be separated from everything we hold dear, and at the same time we care about this body, to maintain this body and to prolong it in order to practice, to see and know deeper truths, to get higher and higher levels of letting go, or not higher and higher levels, but deeper and deeper ways to release and let go, and freedom of the heart, and which brings in itself greater and greater well-being and happiness too.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So yeah, I think that I agree with you. There's so many approach to wanting the same, but we all want the same thing. There's just so many voices. There's no lack of voices in America. what there is the lack of people who want to listen to these voices. So I am not the one to say, this is the right way, this is the wrong way. However, I will say this. I will say that what I try to do in both sharing my teaching, sharing what I was taught, my own learning, which is really the Buddhist teaching, as well as learning from my parents and how they age and how I have to help them. I become an expert on dementia and diabetes and you know and cardiac digestion. Everything that my parents have, I become an expert. And so all that put together, I would just use one word, which is unleash the glory in you. Unleash the glory in you. So as much as people are trying to sell you vitamins and supplements and tools that activate the vagus nerve, and you know and joining this club and joining this club, the glory is within you. Our body is capable of self-healing. You don't need to go and buy a bunch of supplements. You just have to do the right thing and let the body heal itself. As I said, we're now, like hour and 6 minutes. We haven't stopped talking, and but yet our mouth is not dry because we have this harmony between our fight or flight and our rest and digest. And if we were both very uh, excited people, then all this hour and 6 minutes, we would be in fight or flight. Our body would be, full of stress hormone. And the first thing that the stress hormone does is to turn off our salivary gland. Just by looking at us, uh, we haven't aged basically in 3 years. If you just compare what we look like, to 2 years ago, consider all the stress that we endure, because cortisol has a way of, you know, um, eliminating the collagens, so you get wrinkles and you dry up skin because of that. So I want to say that let's just unleash our internal glory. Unleash our internal glory. Our internal glory is, in fact, the four Dharma Vihara, the four immeasurables. That's all inside of us. The compassion, the loving kindness, the empathy, and the equanimity. We're not asking people to practice on that. We ask, well, let me, so there's a clockwise practice and there's a clock to clockwise. So if you go from wisdom, which to me is understanding your emotion and learn how to deal with it, accept it, and then letting it go, then eventually it's like pushing away the cloud, and you see the glory within you, which is the compassion and the loving kindness and empathy. That's, if you want, you can think of it as a outside in practice. As much as that, there's an inside out practice, the counterclockwise, which is regardless of the black cloud that is covering us, some of it come from the outside. We want to anchor into our internal glory. Practice
It,
compassion, practice loving kindness, practice empathy. Bring that out, right?
this is really important, Denny, because usually the way I'm taught, it is an inside out practice with the Brahma Viharas. But I love this. I'm going to use this glory thing. But in another way, with these teachings of the mirror, can we see in another? Can we see their loving kindness? Can we see their compassion? And of course, we do this naturally, but can we take that on board? That we're not separate, and that's there too. So we can see kind of our own glory reflected back to us in others
Absolutely,
when it's there.
absolutely.
And like Denny
Yeah,
says, when these hindrances are removed, like clouds, this is our natural state. It will
yeah,
shine through and
yeah,
come in. Yeah.
yeah. I'll give you my first person experience. Before the pandemic, I used to volunteer in the state prison on Sunday, and then since the pandemic, I haven't been able to do that. But I still, once a year, I will go with one of the venerables to a state prison nearby, and so I still keep track of that. And this is the amazing experience to be in a state prison, to share Dharma with those who are incarcerated. I mean, we can go for an hour to talk about that, but just to kind of wrap it up with your point is that if you greet people with fear, they will reflect that fear back onto you. And prison, the common language, fear is the common language. And from fear, there's violence. And that's the reason why there's so much violence inside the prison, is because it's all fear. And violence becomes their common language. Okay. But then when you bring them outside and now you meet them in a we do that in a small church. You know, there's that one kind of multi-denominational church that everybody comes to, and they walk in and they see that you don't greet them with fear because you have the practice to put aside your emotion. Your internal, what I call glory, the sweetness in you comes out. And you know what is exactly what Josh said is that then they greet you with that, you know. And so if like all of us, we see a neighbor and we might have a disagreement with them. Next time, try to meditate before you open the door, and then think about doing a metta meditation and sharing your um, merit with the neighbor that you hate so much. And then when you walk out the door, you see them. It's as if you already communicate with them. They also suddenly they see the positive energy in you, and they give you back the positive energy. Same thing with your siblings. Same thing with your offspring. Same thing with your spouse. You know, when you think that this is why we practice metta. When you actually have someone that you're having a negative relationship with, you just meditate on that. It's just like, okay, I'll practice on being grateful, and then from that I practice on acceptance and tolerance. First on myself, you know, I'm able to accept all my own shortcoming. I'm able to accept all, and then you move from that. I will forgive myself for the pain that I give to others, either knowingly or unknowingly. And then you flip it around. He says, well, maybe I can also forgive the person who gave me pain. And then I
When we're
will,
ready. When we're ready.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, well, exactly. And this is the inside out practice that we talk about that bring out the goodness in you, and then they will see that it's we
Oh,
live in an electromagnetic world, okay.
no, it might be a little bit easier to see in prison, right? Because it's kind of
Yeah,
a container, but this is an
yeah,
energetic reality. This is not some kind of theoretical thing. I mean, at least in my experience, I know this. And who's the first recipient of me practicing metta towards someone? Myself,
yeah.
because it comes out, and I'm the
It
first, the
starts with
beneficial.
yourself, then the closest of your family, the
Exactly.
extended family, your
But
neighbors,
but
you
any
know.
yeah, even if I'm not practicing towards myself, if I'm practicing medicine for someone else, it has to be here authentically
Yeah,
before it goes out,
yeah,
and I'm benefiting from that,
yeah,
and
absolutely.
yes,
I
yes.
always get good service at restaurants. I always get good service, even though the guy could be really mean to someone else, but they would never be mean to me because I practice metta.
Yeah, it's amazing. And the other thing I want to throw in here, maybe this might be a little too superstitious for some people, but dedicating merit to ancestors too. Our past ancestors. I know it's not superstitious in some Asian cultures; it's quite normal. But supposedly, the ancestors do benefit from that. We benefit from dedicating merit and sharing merit with past ancestors too. So
Yeah.
they're not everybody is tuned into this realm and how this thing works, but I don't see how it can harm anything. And so yeah, so include all beings everywhere, not
Yes.
just
Yes.
even in the unseen too, if we
Yeah.
can. So yeah.
Okay. Okay. All right.
Very good.
Okay. We
Okay.
promise. Okay. So we're coming up to
Yes,
1 hour and 15 minutes. Let's do
that's
this.
right. I
Okay.
think this is a good place to end. And
Yeah.
thank you, Denny, for joining me and indulging me on this. And may all beings out there, including those listening to this, may your practice be of great benefit and merit for yourselves and all beings everywhere. May you all
Well,
realize
thank you
and
for
be
once
free.
again being the initiator.
Oh, hey,
As
I
I
can
said,
do that.
I lost track of how many things you initiated that turned out to be the
Exactly.
right thing.
Well,
Okay,
I
okay,
appreciate that, Denny. That means a lot. All
okay.
right.
All right, you take care. Okay, let me know
You
where you
too.
end up. Okay,
Okay.
okay. Bye bye. Bye
Bye
bye.
bye.